I've lived here since 2012, and this is my stomping grounds. I've been stomping these grounds since I was 19 years old, and I'm just overwhelmed. I've been here trying to spread, some kind of comfort, some kind of support, but this is an overwhelming situation. I don't think we've ever had anything like this, except that guy that died in Kennedy Park that got beat up, but that's been a while. And I'll tell you, my insides are just really sick over this. I've heard people that down there by the doors that have family members in there. There was a girl down there with 5 people, all got shot up. And they're like frantic. What are you going to do? And I can just feel the vibes from other people. So yeah, this is not good.
Gun violence has terrorized and traumatized so many of our communities in this country. And let us be clear, it does not have to be this way, as our friends in Australia have demonstrated.
So here we are again, another mass shooting in the United States done by a person who has some kind of mental illness with an AR-15. And all the gun advocates, do you take your guns away, people, are blaming the gun. It's the gun's fault that it went out on its own into a bowling alley and a bar to commit mass murder. Okay? This is Lewiston, Maine. Reports say that at least 18 people have been killed and a manhunt is still underway for the shooting suspect. They say his name is Richard Card, and he was supposedly trained as a firearms instructor, but then another report came out that he wasn't trained as a firearms instructor. Well, we don't know, okay? Will we ever know what the motive was for this mass shooting? This man is an Army reservist, according to reports. They also say that he had been taken by the local police for a mental health evaluation not long before this shooting took place. And the politicians are ready. They're going to be out in force. They're going to be blaming guns, and they're going to want to continue to take guns away from law-abiding citizens. And of course, Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House's number one liar, I like to say, made her little statement during the press briefing, and quite frankly, my stomach started to churn a little bit just listening to the words coming out of her mouth.
There have been literally hundreds of mass shootings in the last year alone, leaving empty seats at dinner tables across the country, and leaving those who survive these heinous acts both physically and mentally scarred. And while we have made progress since the president signed the bipartisan Safer Communities Act into law, much more must be done. And the president has been clear that executive action alone is just not enough. As the vice president who oversees the newly established Office of Gun Violence and Prevention, stated during today's state luncheon, I know many of you watched very closely as well, and she said, it doesn't have to be this way. As our friends in Australia have demonstrated, again, it does not have to be this way. It's within Congress's power to pass legislation that will make our streets safer, that will make our communities safer, that will make our schools safer. The House has a new speaker who he said he's ready to get to work and to find common ground. Now is the time. Now is the time to find common ground. Let's work together to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Let's work together to enact universal background checks, require safe storage of guns, and keep guns out of the hands of criminals and dangerous individuals who have no business being armed with a weapon of war.
And I apologize for having you watch that, because quite frankly, I wouldn't want to put that person in front of anyone. But you heard her. Hundreds of mass shootings. dinner tables left without a loved one. No kidding? Really? Really, Kareen? But it's the gun's fault, okay? Did this man even have a family? Does anybody know? Did anyone other than the police try to get him help? No one knows. No one's saying anything. Is he going to turn up dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound? Nobody knows. But we do know that gun laws in Maine are very lax. They have an open carry law. If you're 21 years of age or older, you can carry a handgun without a permit. And of course, this was an AR-15. All the gun people blame this gun for every problem, all the world's problems.
Folks who are pushing for tougher gun laws, though, will tell you that the time for thoughts and prayers has long since passed. In Maine, though, efforts to tighten state laws have repeatedly been defeated. The Associated Press reports that proposals that require background checks for private gun sales and create a 72-hour waiting period for gun purchases failed earlier this year. Proposals that focused on school security and banning bump stocks failed in 2019. State residents have also voted down some attempts to tighten gun laws in Maine. And it goes on. I want to bring in NBC's Lindsay Reiser, you have been looking into, and Catherine is with us as well, former assistant DA in the Manhattan DA's office. You've been looking into Maine's gun laws. What did you find?
And they do have relatively low homicide rates compared to rates of high gun ownership. Last year alone, they had only 29 homicides. And there is a strong gun ownership culture in Maine. It goes back to hunting and sports shooting. At the same time, they have permitless carry. So anyone 21 and older can carry a gun without a permit. If you're 18 to 20, you need a permit to carry a weapon unless you serve in the armed forces or you're in the National Guard. And there are exceptions. Federal buildings, the state capitol, Acadia National Park, you need a permit to carry there. We know that they don't require background checks for all gun sales, just for federally licensed dealers. So private sales, gun shows, those don't require background checks. And they do have a yellow flag law. So that differs from a red flag law, which really just requires a court order with testimony from a police officer or a family member to revoke the privilege to have a gun. The yellow flag law also requires a medical evaluation, and so that can now be done through telehealth. And many of the local publications in Maine are saying that it's being used more since that was allowed. And they also don't ban high-capacity magazines. You mentioned gun control advocates. Many of them are blaming this tragic mass shooting on what they call Maine's weak gun laws, and they are calling for an assault rifle ban, also universal background checks. But just as you mentioned, voters have voted down proposals that would strengthen gun laws in recent years.
Well, there's no problem with changing gun laws. There's no problem with having universal background checks. And there's no problem waiting 72 hours to obtain a firearm. But they go on to tell us that the voters turned it down. Well, how about this? I am of the belief that the voters are electing the politicians to their local legislature. Shouldn't the voters be questioning these candidates about how they feel about gun laws? Will they stiffen gun laws, or will they vote against it in the House or the Senate in Maine? Apparently, it was voted against. Now, I don't know if there was a referendum on the ballot about gun laws, but isn't that up to the legislature, the senators and the representatives to pass legislation to strengthen gun laws? It's not on the voters' back, because this is Maine after all. It's a big hunting state. And no, you don't hunt with an AR-15. But my point is, anybody who's a firearms enthusiast may own an AR-15 for target shooting, for range shooting, for sport shooting. I don't know if you can hunt with it. I don't even know if it's legal. But they want to blame the voters for this problem. Great for Australia. Good for you. Let's change the laws, but let's not criminalize and punish law-abiding citizens just because they want to own a firearm. an AR-15, a 9mm, a 40, whatever, a 357, why are you punishing the citizens of your communities who have never been in trouble a day in their life? Why do you want to punish them by taking their guns away? Because that's what this is. Yes, the shooting was horrific. Every shooting is horrific. Every time someone is killed by a firearm, it's horrific. And mass shootings are always worse. But when you hear that the local police have taken this person, Richard Card, to get mental health treatment, where was his family? Why weren't they watching him? And why did he even have access to a firearm if he was having mental health problems? I'm sure he owned it legally, being an Army reservist, but there must have been signs from someone that someone could see that this man was in a crisis. But no one did anything about it. They're all going to come out and say, he was acting normal just yesterday. Did he write a manifesto? Are they going to find it? Are they going to release it? I don't know. But they're going to blame the firearm, and they're going to blame the people who live in the community for this problem. They won't blame the Democrats. They won't blame the Republicans who they elected. Oh no, it's the voters' fault. So everybody who goes to the voting booth, okay, to cast a ballot for a rep or a senator, it's their fault because their legislature did not pass stiffened gun control. I'm so sick of seeing this. I'm tired of talking about it. Any life lost is a tragedy. But the politicians, especially Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and of course Corinne, and every other Democrat are going to point the finger and say, see, we told you. That firearm is dangerous. That firearm is a weapon of war. That firearm is used to commit mass murder. Okay, yes, it's a firearm. It holds a large amount of ammunition. But why, say for instance me, why can't I own it? Why? I've never gotten in trouble in my life. Why? They do not want the citizens of this country to be allowed under the Second Amendment to own any firearm. Because they'll tell you it's not absolute. Well, it is absolute. That's how it was written. And that's how it should stay. But the Democrats do this for votes. They try to stay in office so they can continue to not do what they were elected to do. That's what this all boils down to. So I don't want to bore you with all the details of this horrific event, because quite frankly, it's kind of upsetting to know that at least 18 people were killed by a mentally ill person with a firearm. It wasn't the gun's fault. It wasn't the bullet's fault. It was the person pulling the trigger. It's his fault. And hopefully they find him alive and lock him up for the rest of his days, because that's what he deserves. And if Maine has the death penalty, then I'm all for it. You kill innocent people because you're nuts, you deserve to fry in the electric chair. Disagree with me if you want, but it is what it is. Stop punishing the average person because of these mentally ill lunatics running around with firearms, killing people. And they always go on to say that if you strengthen the gun laws, it'll keep the guns out of the criminal's hand. That is the biggest line of bullshit I've ever seen. After working in law enforcement for over 20 years, I know one thing. A criminal can get a firearm whenever and wherever they want. They don't go buy them legally. They don't go to a private seller. They don't go to an auction or a gun show. They break in people's homes and they steal them. They break in gun shops and they steal them. And they get them from people who sell illegal firearms on the street. That's what the Democrats need to stop. The gun runners, the gun smugglers. those are the people responsible for criminals getting guns, not legal sales. And that's it. Another tragedy in our country that the Democrats are going to jump all over and try to shove it down our throat that gun went out on its own and killed 18 people. And it needs to stop. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night.